Hi, hello, and welcome to LX2 Codependency Coaching Podcast. I am Stella. We are recording back in our regularly scheduled studio back in the house. And I am so grateful. Thank you to everyone who listened to the last podcast. I had no equipment with me. I was just going kind of bare bones off my computer. And I was able to get a podcast recorded. So I'm back in the States. Mexico is a beautiful country. There are lots of bonuses to having really fresh food and beautiful scenery and all the things. And I am so grateful to be home. My daughter and her husband and the baby are still there, and they will be back in June. But I was thinking about this idea when I was headed back about, I was dating this guy a long time ago, and he said once, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Is the challenge or the difficulty, does it have a benefit? And sorry, somebody is emptying a trash very loudly. And so I have been thinking about that, right? So I was in Mexico for 3 weeks. Was the juice worth the squeeze? Absolutely, right? All of the challenges and difficulties and strange things that happened. Was it worth going and being there for the birth of my grandson? Yes, 100%. But I think about the idea of juice worth the squeeze, or is the hardship or challenge worth the benefit often, and especially when it comes to relationships. And I speak about relationships often, mostly because our human experience is to be in relationship, right? It is a drive and a need to connect with others in a meaningful way. And so when I think about that concept of like, is the hardship, the challenge, the difficult thing worth the benefits? I don't think we evaluate that enough. Sometimes we just kind of go through things and, tolerate certain behavior. It's so interesting how often I hear in my office, I still have this shred of hope, or this little feeling that it'll get better, even though despite all of the evidence to the contrary, I want to hold out and hope that this will change. And I love human beings for their willingness to stick things out, even understanding fully that this is not the situation for them. And I love them for that. I really do. I have been in situations myself where I've held on to hope, or, that shred of maybe it'll change or be better. And specific to codependency, which is, one of the big themes that I speak about, oftentimes we will think that we can love somebody better, and that ends up being to our own demise or destruction. Is that if I love them better, they'll love me better, which is why, me and my accountability buddy years ago came up with loving better as a way of loving ourselves differently, right? In recognizing that I'm not going to continue betraying myself or making myself small or changing who I am. If that is the squeeze, then is that worth the very small amount of juice? It's interesting to me when we place value on relationships or connection, or the title that we will have or get in being in relationship with someone, what we will tolerate or put up with. And I think about often how people are motivated for the juice but don't recognize what the cost or the squeeze is. And they are continuing to strive and work hard and, do all the things that they think are going to get them the most juice. And it's interesting too when we think about, do we want a large quantity of juice or do we want a quality of juice? I'm a big lemonade fan. I drink Arnold Palmer's most of the time. I love iced tea. I've always loved iced tea. And lemons are interesting, right? Like, some of the best and juiciest lemons have the most seeds, which is really frustrating. But you learn to work around that and, figure that out, whatever. I can tell you some of the best places that have the best lemonade in the city, and all of those things. Am I willing to drive a little bit further to get good lemonade? Probably. Can I make it myself? Probably. I've seen me do it. But it's that concept of thinking about what is the cost benefit analysis, which is the more professional way of saying, is the juice worth the squeeze? When we think about how it will benefit our lives in a longer term, then sometimes I just have to get through the moment, right? Sometimes I just have to get through this hard situation because it is worth it to me. The benefit far outweighs the cost. So back to Mexico. Merida is at the top of the Yucatan Peninsula. It is surrounded by jungle, consequently nature, and there was so much nature. Bugs of every size, type, and variety. There were lizards often in the house and out. I did see several iguanas. But one of the things that I really enjoyed that I didn't anticipate being, in a humid climate or whatever, was there are fruit trees everywhere. And so when I was in Italy, there were also fruit trees everywhere. Different fruit, like there was oranges and lemons primarily in Sorrento. We were driving through Spain, as a matter of fact, and there were groves and groves of oranges, and my accountability buddy was like, "Oh, this is where Valencia oranges come from." And I was like, "Yeah, we're driving through the state of Valencia." And so I was used to seeing fruit trees, right? But not like you do in, so we were outside of Merida in the town of Coquel. And just walking around in the neighborhood, there were several different kinds of limes. There were mangoes. There were these little green berry things. And so I wasn't expecting that. And that was awesome to be able to see just fruit growing around. Lots of little stores in basically houses, little restaurants, little taco shops. It was really interesting to see how, obviously, that's why I love traveling and going to different countries, how other people live, and also how people tolerate and get through things that we would perceive as difficult. Like, not having water that comes out of the sink that you can drink, or not being able to put toilet paper in the toilet. The same is true in Greece. You can't do that. But it's all these things, right? And so, yes, there are challenges. Yes, they are, certainly different, foreign to what we are used to. But was it worth going and living there for 3 weeks? Absolutely. Right? Was it worth having those experiences of seeing more than one millipede in the house? Yes, absolutely. And I think about that, right? I think about the things that we deal with and tolerate to live in certain places, or to stay in certain relationships, or to, go through hard things. Like, for example, going through a higher degree program, a higher graduate degree program. Is it challenging? Yeah. For everyone doing it. Yeah. But is it worth it if that's what you're choosing to do? Yes, 100%. The same would be true for trade school. The same would be true for any kind of furthering of your skill set or learning other things. Is it difficult in the moment? Yeah. Is it also worth it? Yes. And so it's those kinds of things when you think about cost benefit or juice and squeeze, really thinking about how much is this going to cost me, and is the benefit worth it? Specific to relationships, a lot of times, and again, at the beginning, everything is always fantastic. But I do tell clients often, listen and also pay attention to what they're saying with their mouth and what they're doing in their behaviors, because 9 times out of 10, somebody will show you exactly who they are and what their intention is at the very beginning. And if you don't pay attention to it, or you dismiss it, or you disregard that that is actually true, then you're breaking your own heart, bud. Like, you are creating the challenges that you will go through without really recognizing, oh, they said this at the beginning, right? They said they didn't want anything serious. They said that they were not motivated to change their job or do something different. They said they didn't want kids. They said that they didn't want marriage, right? All of those things people usually say, not casually or flippantly. They say it out loud, and then we're so silly and we're like, I could change their mind. I'm going to show them how amazing and incredible I am. They will choose something different. And again, I love human tenacity. I love a human being's willingness to like stick it out and be like, maybe if I do this different or better, or I'm different than the last person that they said this out loud to, we'll have a different experience. And I recognize that often it is not our goal to break our own heart, but it is something to consider how often we continue to persevere in a situation that does not benefit us, other than we learn lots of skills and tools. We learn lots of things that we would not have learned otherwise had we not gone through that situation. And I am often humbled to be in a room with someone who said, they said this at the beginning, and this was their behavior. And I'm like, how many red flags did you dismiss or not look at directly? Or did you think were not red flags, right? And oftentimes they'll say, well, I didn't think that's what they meant, or I didn't see that as a flag because at the time we were just casual, right? I wanted to spend more time with this person and learn who they are, which again, I love. I've done it myself. In fact, the individual who taught me the phrase, is the juice worth the squeeze? Turns out the juice was not, which is fine. I learned a lot in that relationship because I didn't pay attention to the flags. Now, along the way, there were lots of things that were indicators of the situation, and I disregarded them. The juice for me was learning independence in a different way. It was finding out that I can do things on my own and separate from another person. Like, all of those things were super helpful in that relationship dynamic. When I recognized I can show up and do things that I enjoy, right? I don't have to wait for someone else to do them. I don't have to wait for someone else to do them with me. I don't have to wait for someone to like what I do. I just have to do it. And once I did, I was like, dope, I can do this without you. And so the squeeze for me was learning how to do things independently. The squeeze for me was actually learning how to like doing things independently and appreciating my own company, my own time. In this relationship, without bashing anybody in particular, that individual had taken me to the airport, I kid you not, in a 2-year span. We only dated for 8 months, but we were friends for 2 years. And they took me to the airport, I think 6 times, right? Never once went with me. Never once was able to like do the trips that I went to. I left the country. I left the continental US. I traveled to a lot of different states. Like, I did a lot of things. And this individual took me to the airport, which I'm super grateful for, and sometimes picked me up from the airport, which was also really kind. But I did recognize that, like, I had gone on several camping trips. I had gone on, I went to several things on my own, and I got very comfortable. That was, in fact, the juice, is I got very comfortable doing things on my own. Was I disappointed? Absolutely. But again, I recognized somewhere along the journey, this isn't about them, right? And that's what made it very easy to then, when the pandemic happened, I was like, cool, I get to be done. Like, this is finished. But I was able to be by myself. I was able to feel really comfortable doing that. And it helped me to change my standards, to recognize what I was willing to put up with and what I wasn't. And so when I think about clients who will tolerate certain behavior, or people in my life who have stayed in situations for a long period of time, they evaluate the worth of and value of their struggle on a regular basis. Now, what I challenge you to do is to recognize that that evaluation needs to happen consistently, as well as making a plan for what the alternative is, right? How many other things can you focus your attention on before you recognize this isn't working, right? All the memes and reels and videos that talk about how women will stay in a situation and quietly tolerate things until they don't anymore, until they say, I'm done, I don't want to keep doing this, right? And I've been in my office, certainly with lots of women who finally get to that place, but it does take a pretty significant evaluative period. And it's not that men don't do it, because they do. I'm just speaking of my client base, and certainly people I know, that women will continue working harder way past their desire to stay in something. And it's not just on the relationship, though they will do that. They will also work on themselves, right? They will work on, I've got people in my caseload who will get a whole ass degree, right? Will get a whole ass business license or real estate license or learn a whole new skill to be able to solidify their ability to do things on their own. That squeeze is far more beneficial to them than the situation that they have tolerated for a long period of time. There are also other people in my client load, and just people I know, who will resolve things or kind of theorize or there's a word that I am looking for. Rationalize. Thank you. It starts with an R. Rationalize that what they are getting from a situation is substantial enough, right? They don't want to break up the family. They don't want to change their zip code. They don't want to disappoint anyone else. They don't want to feel like a failure. They don't want to, like, those things, that particular juice is not worth it for them. And I get that, right? I do understand that there are lots of ways that we evaluate in relationships whether or not a situation is for us, right? If going to Mexico and being uncomfortable and finding bugs everywhere is not your cup of tea, then yeah, you're not going to do that. And that's okay, right? If recognizing that I will tolerate a lot of things and my happiness is not the most important in this situation, then yes, I will continue to stay in a situation with very little juice. Is the juice quality juice, right? Am I getting something that is more beneficial, or is the other person gaining something more significant than what I am gaining? Then yes, I will continue to squeeze that particular fruit. Right? It's interesting, right? It's something to pay attention to. When I was thinking about this concept, I hadn't listened to any podcasts while I was away. I think I maybe listened to just mine and that was it. But I came back and there was a man on Trevor Noah who is a geopolitical commentator who knows a lot about different geopolitical things, right? And evaluates those things and writes on them. And he was talking about how lots of different countries have made decisions based on if the juice is worth the squeeze, right? Is the benefit worth it for us to get involved with these other countries, either from a combative place or from a supportive place, and how the United States has changed their role, certainly from where it was, let's say 50 years ago, to where it is today. 50 years ago being the end of the Cold War, and our relationship with our allies in Europe was solid. And, there were a lot of different things that happened 50 years ago that are now different, right? 50 years ago was probably the end of the Vietnam War, and we were shifting lots of perspectives on a social platform here in the United States. And here we are now 50 some years later, and this is where we are, right? And so it really did reinforce this idea of like, we need to evaluate on a consistent basis whether or not the cost is worth the benefit, right? And it's funny, and interesting. When I think about working with clients, sometimes I'll have them do the pros and cons list, right? And that's one way to look at it. A lot of times when my clients have business backgrounds or whatever, we do a cost benefit. We do does the benefit of this situation, circumstance, relationship, whatever, does it benefit you enough so that those pros are reasons to keep you going and the cons aren't really that like detrimental to you meeting your goal, right? Lots of people do hard things all the time. Lots of people do lots of things that are uncomfortable often, and more often than not, they are thinking about the worst case scenario and the really detrimental things. They're less looking at the positive and benefits of changing a situation or circumstance. They are thinking, change is going to be hard. Moving out is going to be difficult. My kids are going to have to go through this hard thing, and I don't want that for them. I get that. I do. But when we look at the long-term consequences of your joy and your freedom and your pleasure and how to model that for them, is it worth it? Right? And that's something each individual has to manage and look at for themselves. But a lot of times really recognizing that we are staying in situations and circumstances, sacrificing ourselves, hoping that that sacrifice will benefit other people, right? Hoping that that last shred of hope. It's so interesting. Today is Thursday, right? So I have seen at least 15 to 17 clients already this week. And more than once, more than 3 times have clients said to me, and I was just holding on to this last shred of hope. And I was like, okay, I get it, right? Also, what is your goal? What would you like to see? What would you like to accomplish? How would you like to feel if you were to let that go, right? If you were to acknowledge that you've done everything that you could and a lot of this was not up to you, right? It was up to someone else to also work on repairing that, building better communication, learning other skills, right? Usually the person in my office is doing all the things they need to do. It's the person that they are coming into my office to talk about that haven't been doing their work. So it's interesting, right? To think about this idea of juice and squeeze value. One of the things that the person who was on the What Now podcast was talking about was that people are willing to pay for a natural diamond and pay a lot more because of the perceived, like, nature did this amazing thing, whereas like a lab created diamond is also made the same way, it's just made in a lab, and they aren't willing to pay as much for that, right? So it's almost as though we find more value in toil or hard things than we do in making things easier for ourselves. I don't know that to be true, but I have evaluated or at least observed that that might be true, right? And so it's something to think about, right? When you recognize, how do I and what do I want from this one magical, crazy, wild life that I have? Do I want to keep toiling and working hard at something and not get the most quality juice or not have the most quality experience? It's amazing when I think about people who travel for like music festivals or to go and see a beautiful nature situation. A few years ago, my best friend went to Yellowstone to see the trees, right? And to see all the things. I love traveling. I love going to different places and having experiences. I had to spend an extra night in Cancun. And so I was like, I'm here. I don't leave until later. I'm going to get a cab. I'm going to go and see the beach. Like, going to the beach is super awesome and important for me. Went to the wrong beach, had to walk. And again, the juice was definitely worth the squeeze to be able to get some pictures of my dog on the beach. And I enjoyed the experience, right? I want you to evaluate for yourself what it is you're doing, how much squeezing you're doing, what is the cost, and is the benefit worth it, right? There's your nugget. Thank you to everyone who's listening all over the place. I'm, like I said, I'm often humbled and always grateful for recognizing that this platform that I have been able to curate and cultivate naturally, has continued to grow, and I am grateful. If you need to get a hold of me, it's lx2.cod.coach@gmail.com. You can find me at lx2 codependency coaching on Instagram or on TikTok. You can find me at LunaX2 LLC. Thank you again to everyone and everyone who's wished me congratulations on my grandson, and my daughter, and certainly my son-in-law. So I will talk to you guys soon. And in the meantime, be good to yourself. Take care.